Good. You know, when I started People's Rights Washington, I wanted to just do work in Oregon because all my activism with the Bundy trials was in Oregon and Nevada, and then in Utah for Rick Kerber. And I had so many contacts, and I really did not have many contacts in my own state here in Washington. I mean, I'm born and raised here in the city I live in, so I have tons of friends. We've been in the same church for 25 years. But as far as the freedom fighters and activists go, I didn't know anybody who would come and truly stand with us if we ended up having a violation of our rights that were right here in our own town. And when we launched our first meeting, I just posted an event. We didn't have the texting system set up yet that Ammon was doing. And we had over 100 people show up here in Clark County. And we have continued meeting faithfully every single week, except for 1 week since that first meeting in April. And now we have people, I mean, we are so blessed with the community of people that we have. I could easily call 100 people right now if I was in an emergency or crisis, I needed any help. And so these meetings, meeting weekly really does matter. It really matters. You will, if you hear a call out for somebody that you don't know, you might show up. But if you get a call out for somebody that you know and you know their children and their families, you are going to show up. You're going to come hell or high water. You're going to be there for that person. And that's what we found in the call outs that I've done now for Olympia, which is 2.5 hours, 3 hours away. We had more people showing up to Olympia from my area here in area 4 than we have from the Olympia area. People following me from, you know, Vancouver saying, guys, we got to get up to the hospital. A baby's been taken. And I'll send that text system out. I have 1,000 people in my system right here in my area. And then we have 1,000 in the Olympia area. And the majority of the people at that hospital to fight for the baby that we helped get returned came right here from Clark County. And that wasn't because anything special with me. It was because we've become a community, and where we go one, we go all. So these meetings really are important.
Awesome. And what was the situation with that hospital and the baby?
That situation, my friend John Lamb up in Montana, his wife called me, and at about 11 o'clock at night, we had been doing a million other things here, fighting lots of battles, and I really didn't have the time to get involved, especially with it being a couple hours away. And the Lamb family called me and said, a family friend of ours just had their baby taken away. The baby the mother had, what did she have? Lupus. And so she had already isolated for 3 months prior to the baby being born. She was so worried about infection and getting sick that she had isolated herself. So she ended up going into preterm labor, not by far at all. And the baby was completely healthy and fine and nursing, and everything was great when he was born. But she went into labor early, so she ended up going to the hospital. She planned to have a home birth, but with preterm labor, she was like 3 or 4 weeks early. She said, I'm just going to go to the hospital. They asked her if they could test her for COVID, and she said, you know, absolutely. I isolate at home. My husband and I aren't exposed to anybody. My husband works from home. So she tested, and then she went into labor. And as soon as that little baby boy was born, they came in the room and said, I'm sorry, but you tested positive. We have to take your son from you. The husband had gone in and was using the bathroom when he came out, and then we're talking to the mom and wheeling their son out of the room. He was gone from their site for 3 days. And during that 3-day period, they told him police force I'm not test because my wife just had a false positive. I know it's false positive because we haven't been exposed to anybody. And now you want me to test? What if I have a false positive? You won't let us see my son again for weeks. And so he said, I'm not testing until I talk to an attorney. Well, they removed him by police force for not submitting to this test, and then told the mom that they would retest her in 10 days. So this mom sat in that hospital room for 3 days without her baby, without her husband, completely alone, given a breast pump, and said, here, you can pump milk and we'll take it to your baby, but you're not going to see him. And so this family friend reached out to me, and I was so moved by what I heard. I said, we will be there tomorrow morning. I asked if we should show up that night, but it was already 11 o'clock at night. We always, with people's rights, I always try to remind people, you got to speak to the family. We want to help people who want us to defend their rights, because we can show up anywhere and say we're defending rights, but if the person who's being victimized doesn't want us there, then we really don't have any rights to defend. And so I was able to get a hold of the father that night. He said, help me. He was so depressed and distraught. He sounded like he was suicidal. I mean, he literally was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to see my son again for 10 days. We're anti-vaxxers. They're probably going to vaccinate my son. They're probably going to circumcise him, vaccinate him. You know, he was just so distraught. He's like, my wife is crying in the hospital right now on this video chat that he was doing. His wife was just bawling, saying like, come help me, come do something. And he was calling attorneys, and he was like, what do I do? And I said, people have to get to the hospital. That hospital needs to have every phone line ringing off the hook. Call the sheriff's department, call the media. You have to create enough commotion to let this hospital know that you are not going to tolerate this garbage. And he essentially said, do whatever you need to do, which is so helpful when we have the backing of the family to show up and help. And so at 5 o'clock in the morning, I got in my car. I did a post that went viral. I think we reached on People's Rights Washington, we reached over 1 million people on one post within 4 hours. And, you know, I tried to write up very compelling statements in the article to let people know how serious this was. And so we showed up there about 8 o'clock in the morning. I didn't know who would show up. I didn't know if anybody would show up. I mean, it was a long drive. It's the middle of this COVID craziness. And we ended up with over 100 people making it there that day. About 60 of them were from my community here in Clark County. And we essentially showed up and told the hospital, we're not leaving until baby Grayson is back in his parents' arms. Now, the challenge with making statements like that is you have to be willing to back it up. And the only way that you're going to be taken seriously is if you sacrifice a couple times and you back up that statement. Then you kind of get to live off of it for a little while before you have to really do it again. So the hospital and the police department knew I was not bluffing. They knew I was not leaving that hospital until the mother and child were reunited. And so it ended up taking from 10 o'clock in the morning is when everybody really started to raise hell, just making phone calls, emails. You couldn't get through any lines of the hospital because so many people were calling and saying, return that baby to his mother. This is kidnapping. Even the wicked CDC says, and all the other sites that you read from the government, that it is up to the mother if she chooses to set a child. Likely that child will end up getting COVID. Hers turned out positive anyway, but we had to show up and protest. We had to use, we stay on the sidewalk so we don't violate private property rights. I always try to enter the property once until they trespass me, and then we retreat back to the sidewalk where it's public. We don't threaten anybody. We never want to become the tyrants that we're fighting, but we want to use our First Amendment right to make a very strong point as we don't tolerate this in America. It is not allowed in America, and people have medical situations. And if this other woman that day with her every right to leave, to stay, to separate, to not separate, that was between her and her husband. So we ended up staying there all day. We did drive through the parking lot a few times at the hospital, honking, saying things like St. Peter's kidnaps babies, St. Peter's is a child trafficker. Those statements seem really inflammatory, but if you really get to the heart of kidnapping, that is the heart of kidnapping. We've just learned in America how to sugarcoat everything. If it's a hospital, they're medically protecting the child. If they're wearing a badge, it's just doing their job. We've really gotten through a law in America And so I try to just call things what they are. If the kid was kidnapped,